Okay, thank you. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And thanks to Vision Week for creating this platform for us to share and talk about what is regeneration. So my name is Sadra Saffari, and I'm here with Amanda Bryan from Jacobs and Akasadaka Robison from Flatfish Projects. And we're also privileged to have with us today Andrea Barker from Dunedin City Council and Brett Nunn, who's also working on a project with Dunedin City Council and who is also on the Regenerative Practitioner series this year. So before I talk a little about what connects us together and what we're going to go through in the session today, we'll start with karakia. Tuku a te wairua kia ririki ngā taumata hai arahi. Ia tātou mahi me tā tātou whai i ngā tikanga rātou mā. Kia mau, kia ita, kia koria ingaro, kia pupuri, kia whakamaua, kia tina, tina. Homie, huie, tai kie. So what connects Amanda, myself, and Akasadaka together is that and Brett, who's been on the Regenerative Practitioner series this year. So we've all been through a program that developed or that started in New Zealand in 2015 and is delivered by a group from the US called Regeneration Group. So it's in its 5th year now, and without talking too much about the program, it's about regeneration and regenerative development, and the learning and the processes that are needed to engage and deliver projects that are regenerative. So the program has also been the catalyst for a community that's been growing here in Aotearoa for the last 5 years, and this community has been involved in various different projects and people in organizations across. There's a high concentration in Auckland. Yeah, we have one of the first people that were on the TRP who's at JazzMax, and there's quite a lot of people at Auckland Council. So we're all helping each other learn and develop how we can regenerate Aotearoa, or how we can bring more regenerative projects to this place. So Regeneration Group and others such as Carol Samford, who bought the who bought the first 7 principles of regeneration in the form that we're going to be looking at them today. They've been practicing and using the term regeneration for over 40 years. So we've been seeing it pop up more and more recently. So that was one of the motivations why we wanted to speak with you today and explore with you what regeneration really means for us. Yeah, what it means to work regeneratively as well, and whether, yeah, I mean, we're hearing it like regenerative agriculture and regenerative economies and regenerative development, and so we're really keen to explore, well, what is regeneration as opposed to sustainability? Where does it sit compared to sustainability? And are we really being regenerative when we're using the word? And what does that mean? So yeah, really looking forward to jamming on this in a sense. So we're also all learning about what it is, and have been humbled by the depth of the body of work that we've come into contact with. So I will, oh, questions. Yeah, so if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to write in the chat on Facebook and, sorry, on YouTube. And you can also write into the question and answers in the Zoom if you're on the Zoom. And you can also upvote questions. And then we'll have some time at the end to look at questions. And if you want us to bring you in, if you're on Zoom and you want us to bring you into the chat so you can join the conversation, if you have a question at the end, you want us to bring you in so we can have a discussion around it, then you can type that into the question and answers as well, and we can bring you into the chat room. I'm hoping that goes smoothly. We haven't done it on the last one, so if we can't do it, then we'll do our best to answer your question. So that's it from me. I'll pass it on to Akasadaka to take us through a wake-up exercise.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name's Akasadaka, and I'm based in Te Tara o Te Eka o Maui, or the Coromandel Ranges, and currently I'm sitting in the heart of our music shop, Lotus Realm, and someone was just playing music in the background, so you might hear a little atmospheric music being played in the background. So I thought just presence before we start, the purpose that we came up with for this session, so that you can get a sense of, start to get a sense of how we work. I think what we'll probably be doing over the next wee hour is being quite transparent about our process, because in a way, as Sadra said, we are learning, and partly the learning is about unraveling decades of conditioning around thinking in particular ways, where we deconstruct things to thinking in terms of whole living systems. And I've had personally today, just over the last couple of days, about 5 hours of professional development that really disrupted how my habitual thinking. And so I'm feeling a little bit discombobulated, right? Let's check in with the purpose. So the purpose we came up with, it was to define regeneration in such a way that transforms your understanding of how to contribute to regeneration in Aotearoa. Yeah, we'd love to see our beautiful country come to life, be viable, the economy be viable, and for our people to be growing and developing just as our living systems are. So I'm going to start with a wake up exercise, and just really support us to wake up into conscious energy. I'm sure each of you have had quite long days. I have. And, you know, you just kind of sink into habit and pattern after a while. But let's see if we can wake ourselves up together. And so the only thing I could suggest is, as we go through this exercise, you might actually enjoy, you might get some benefit from writing down some of the things that come out that you could use later. So get comfortable. This exercise will probably work best with your eyes closed. So we've had a bit of a cold snap over the last couple of days. And so I'm going to invite you to take your mind out into space, where it's a hell of a lot colder. And in your mind's eye, bring to mind the whole of the earth. And just hold it there, spinning in your mind. And just coming into relationship with the earth as if it was a good friend. And just noticing what you're seeing as it spins, what you're sensing. I just invite you to go beyond your initial impressions in the mental mantras and just go a bit deeper. What stirs from your depths as you witness the continents and oceans, the flora and fauna, the ecosystems, people, cities? In a way, we could see Aotearoa being in service to the whole of the earth. Now I invite you to fly in over New Zealand, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. What do you see? Notice, sense. Come into relationship as you would a good friend. Go beyond your initial impressions, the mental mantras. Go a bit deeper. What stirs from the depths as you witness the coastlines and beaches, the forests and the rivers, the towns and the cities, the farms, the cows, the sheep, the kiwi fruit, the oranges, the apples, the people? Make a note if you need to as things come up. New Zealand, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, in service to the whole of the earth. Now I invite you to fly in over your place, where you are right now. What do you see, notice, sense? Come into relationship with your place as if it was a good friend. Bring your whole community to mind. Go beyond your initial impressions, the mental mantras. Go a bit deeper. What stirs from the depths as you witness your whānau, your work, your colleagues, your friends, the parks and walkways, the traffic, the cafes, the pubs, the schools, the movie theatres, the sports fields. What do you notice? What are you getting a sense of? Your community, your place is in service to New Zealand, Aotearoa. New Zealand, Aotearoa is in service to the whole of the earth. Now ask yourself these questions. What brings this place to life? What is killing it? What are you taking responsibility for? What value-adding role could you play? Choose something that would really bring you to life, something that might scare and excite you in equal measure. Go beyond your gifts and talents to your essence, your uniqueness, your singularity. Work one of one. And that is you in service to your community, to your place, which is in service to New Zealand, Aotearoa, which is in service to the whole of the earth. Fantastic. Take a few deep breaths and just enter out of that that we exercise for a moment. And we're just going to spend a little bit of time keying into regeneration before we to set the scene for what's to come next. So what we're going to be working on is going to be asking you to work with the stillness and the spaciousness of your mind. And we're going to be contrasting degeneration and regeneration in your experience to set some grounding. And so what I'm hoping this will do is start to wake your mind up out of vital, automatic, and sensitive mental energies into conscious energy. So I invite you to hold in your mind an experience that has been regenerative for you. Something that's really brought you to life. And something that's been degenerative for you. Something that's really sucked the life out of you, drained your energy. I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, I had 2 meetings back to back. In one of the meetings, I came out and I was truly inspired. It was just like, yeah, I'm ready for action. I love my work. I love doing this. This is great, full of purpose and meaning. Followed by a meeting that sucked out the will to live. It was mechanical. It was functional. It was about ticking boxes. Yeah, and it wasn't about connection, relating, or working together. So that's an example of regenerative and degenerative. And what I'd like you to do is you hold both of these experiences in mind that you've got. Is just to name a couple of characteristics of each that are unique to each. You know, so what makes your degenerative experience degenerative, and what makes your regenerative experience regenerative? And just make a note down on your piece of paper or in your mind, these characteristics. And if you like, you can write them into chat so that we can see them. That's up to you. Great. So that's the wake up exercise. I hope it woke you up a bit. And I'd now like to pass over to Amanda Bryan. Amanda, it's all yours.
Thank you. And kia ora, my name is Amanda Bryan. I'm actually feeling really awake now, thank you. That was a great activity, exercise to go through. And I can really appreciate what you're saying about conversations that regenerate me and conversations that might degenerate me as well. So just as a wee intro, I'm a principal sustainability consultant, and I've been doing regenerative practitioner work for about 3 or so years now. I'm actually based in the Waikato, and I do have an Australian New Zealand role, and been working with Sadra and the likes with regards to regenerative Waikato for the past year or so. So as we know though, sustainability isn't a new topic, right? We've all heard the word. It's been around for a while. However, in reflection, we're starting to ask ourselves, Is this delivering what we were all hoping for? And are we moving towards a place where we really want to be? In some aspects, it's starting to show up for us that many of the issues are in fact getting a lot worse. So right now, I'm finding in my discipline that people are starting to want to know what's next and what is it that we can do? What more can I do? So what we've done here is we want to show you an image. This demonstrates the paradigm discernment. It demonstrates the relationship between degeneration, sustainability, and regeneration. So where degeneration down the conventional end of the chart to the left-hand side is typically your conventional way of thinking. This is where we tend to generate fragmented thinking by compartmentalizing issues. Now, in sustainability, sitting in the middle there, we tend to talk about doing less harm or doing better. We find sustainability typically starts with a problem and not the essence. So an act may be sustainable. So for example, using less resources, reducing externalities, and causing less or no harm over time. However, this does restrain how we think about it and how we build potential. Now, to the right hand of the screen, you can see regeneration. So regeneration is about living and whole systems. We actually need to start thinking and asking ourselves, what is the whole we're working with? And what is the living system of this whole? This then starts to lead us to think about the essence of the whole and its potential. So if you've got any thoughts or personal reflections in regards to that situation of when you've been feeling a situation has regenerated you, then feel free to put it into the comments box as well. Thank you. Throw it back to Sadra. Talk about, sorry, is it framework?
No, it's Sadra. He's going to jam on what is regeneration.
This diagram is so full, like whenever I look at it, there's something new that I take away. Yeah, so for regeneration, regeneration is a process that only happens in living systems. It requires us to learn, see, and work with life as living. So going back, like if I'm looking at this diagram and I'm looking at in some areas or industries or how we sometimes approach sustainability, it's often from a place of, as Amanda was saying, what's the problem? How can we solve it? And that's fundamentally a different paradigm. So what regeneration is really asking of us is that we learn to work with life as living, and life is inherently, and the living systems that we live in can be very complex. So regenerative development, or some of the work that we've been grappling with over the last 5 years, is about how we hold that complexity and reconcile that complexity so that we can work with life as living. So the 7 principles for us are a way of exploring are a guide for us to work regeneratively. And just to talk briefly about the 7 principles. So the way that in the form that we're going to be presenting them today, it comes from a brilliant woman in the US called Carol Sanford, who has written numerous books, and she is the 7 principles came through to her from her maternal grandfather who is part Mohawk. And these principles are quite, they're quite universal throughout. They're really about how life works. So without talking too much about them further, Akasadaka is going to introduce us a little bit to what a framework is. So the 7 principles is a framework, and then we'll get into the 7 principles.
Great, thanks, Sadra. So you would have all heard the term actions have consequences. And of course, we can see a number of the consequences of our actions happening at the moment on this planet. And it's a little bit like, how do we increase the effectiveness and skillfulness of our actions so that we can bring about health, vitality, viability, and evolutionary capacity. You know, how do we regenerate? How do we act in a way that we regenerate? Well, let me give you this little bit of a logic sequence that I use. So actions have consequences. The decisions we make inform our actions. What we think informs the decisions we make. How we think informs what we think. And often I think until I came across the Regenesis Institute, I really hadn't sort of looked deeply into how I think about things. I definitely knew what I thought about things, but not how I was coming up with those opinions or those ideas. And wouldn't it be just amazing if you could alter how you think to affect how you are acting in the world, particularly if you had a desired purpose in mind, for example, like regenerating. So this is where regenerative frameworks come in. Regenerative frameworks support us to learn how to think in regenerative ways. So it is a mental framework, and we use them to see and understand how living systems work. What's brilliant about them actually is that you can put it, they're like a tool. You can put a framework in the middle of a table in a meeting and say, this is what we're going to work around today, and to support our collaborative thinking for this particular purpose. So they're actually tools, and the tools to be used. And there's a whole plethora of them. And today we're actually we're introducing you to quite a complex tool. After our webinar the other day, we realized how large this framework actually was. And we could spend quite a bit of time just on one point. So a way of looking at these frameworks and the nature of a framework is a little bit like if you were passing by a construction site and you look towards the construction site, you'd see a whole lot of framing. And off that framing, you'd see, like, you know, plasterboard, plywood, you'd see wiring come in and out of it, pipes, and everything's hanging off that framing. This is why, you know, we call them frameworks, because they're mental frameworks. So when we're building our thinking, when we're thinking collaboratively, we need something to hang our thoughts, our insights and reflections off so they make sense. Otherwise, what you can end up with is just a confused mess and not really knowing where you're going. So this is the power of a regenerative framework. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. Just trying to find the mute button. Yes, we do. So just to echo, so these 7 first principles have been developed as fundamentals to the way we work in a regenerative way. So when we work with these, it's with the intention of finding the full potential of an effort that will proceed through 7 phases of thinking and acting. So Sadra's just showing the 7 at the moment. So those are the 7 phases, each of which will build upon and interact with each other. So regeneration work starts when seeing the whole, seeing the living system and the structure of the whole. It actually requires us to ask, what is the whole? For example, a person as a whole, a city as a whole, community as a whole and LifeShed as a whole. So what we're going to try and do throughout talking through these is ground them in examples. So with regards to understanding how we develop our understanding of what a whole is, we had a project in which we asked ourselves, you know, what is this project? And we started to build and think around story and place. So to establish that, what we did was we did an exercise to think about the whole, and we asked, what are we defining as our project? What is it that our project really is? And so through this exercise, we actually found the project wasn't just about a building or a science lab. We actually found that our project was around building a place for community to innovate. And it was a building that people could actually learn from. So it was actually developed into a bit of a living lab that could actually educate the users that were using it. And that they wanted to build a project that was inclusive and not just for science. So that's just one example of how you could start conceptualizing the whole. I'll pass it on to potential.
Yeah, just going back to the whole, like it's interesting how on reflecting on this one, like I find it interesting how that question isn't always it's not people, like oftentimes in projects I find no one really asks that question, how big is here, like, and that's a common question that I like to ask to get people thinking about the whole, like what is the actual living system that we're talking about. An example is when I was involved in a community project here in Whangaroa Raglan. We started some conversations with certain funders about the project, and they came back to us and said, like, well, what are you actually working with? Are you working with Raglan Town, or are you working with and we discovered that it was like for different stakeholders, it was often they had a different idea as to what the whole was, and it was necessary for us to define it. And oftentimes when we're working regionally or within council, the boundaries of what a whole is are quite arbitrary when you compare it to a living system. So they're often political boundaries that cut right across watersheds and rivers. And so it was important for us to really look at what is the area when we're talking about community development or community-led development here. What are we talking about in terms of who is this community and what is the living system? So yeah, really important principle to start with in terms of knowing what the whole is and defining what the living system is that we're working with.
Yeah, could I add in something, Sadra?
Yeah.
And could you just blow it up so we can see everyone just when we're talking? That'd be great. So this whole thing really sort of, when I was learning about it, really blew me apart because I, you know, I'm an ideas guy and I have all these ideas popping off, and I think how yeah, I want to do a project, but then I look inward and I just look at the project, and it's my project or my group's project or my team's project, and I'm just looking in. I'm actually not looking out to see what it's really impacting. Well, and if I do, I just sort of, it's a nominal lookout. I go, oh yeah, okay. I just look, oh yeah. But with regenerative work, it was just like, no, you've got to look at what it's nested within to start with, and what is that whole it's nested within. What is the impact your project's going to have on that living system? And from the day I heard that, it's just changed how I've approached initiating projects since then. I was just blown away. I just realized I couldn't do a project in a place without understanding how it was going to impact the whole living system in which it was nested. Yeah, so I was very grateful to hear that. Back to you, Sadra.
Yeah.
Or is it me?
Well, yeah. You can flow right into essence.
Okay. Yeah. so once you've sort of got an understanding of the whole that you're working with, each whole has a unique essence. Sometimes people call it a singularity, essence, uniqueness, and it's, how can I say? I think how I like to look at it is, if you understand what the essence of this is of something, you can understand what will bring it to life. Yeah. And I always think about this as, you know, I'm thinking of some of my good friends, and I think, well, if I understand what the essence of my mate is, and you know, it takes a long time to get to know someone, to know what really brings them to life. Well, I know what will really bring him to life. Yeah. So why don't I do that? And but it's also reflected back on me. It's like, well, if I know the essence of who I am, and it's actually very, very difficult to see that for yourself. You probably need some help with someone that can think, do essence thinking. Then you can understand what will bring you to life. Yeah. And it's the same with the place. So with the project we're working on down in South Dunedin, which both Brett and Andrew are involved in, we went through a process called Lenses, which comes out of Colorado State University and the Clare Institute there. And there's been hundreds of experts and specialists created this regenerative process that you can go through. And part of the process is we go through something called discovery workshops. And in those discovery workshops, and this was a lot of fun actually. It took a bit of research and a bit of work, but what we looked at was the history, the geology, the geography, the hydrology of a place, to start to understand how life worked there. And in one of the workshops, we strung across from one end of the room to the other end of the room a string with a series of cards on it that represented the different turning points in the history of this place. And it was absolutely fascinating process. It was a very engaging process. And as we pegged up different cards at different turning points throughout time, for example, Otago won the Ranfurly Shield in 1957 and then lost it a week later. But it was a significant enough event to be pinned up as a turning point in Dunedin and South Dunedin's history, or Dunedin Otapoti's history. And it, you know, it's just like, it just sort of, you know, just the sort of, there was some life to it. But so when we had strung this up, what we started to look at was for the patterns and relationships that were occurring and repeating throughout time. And that starts to give us an indication of what the essence of this place might be. And so with South Dunedin, it does take a long time to sort of understand a place and to reveal its essence. So we've had a first crack at it. I won't share it because it's not public knowledge yet, but just giving you an idea of what the essence of place. So once we understand what the essence of place is, we can then start to identify its potential, or start to see its potential. Over to you, Sadra.
Awesome.
Or is there anything you want to add on essence?
No, I mean, it's all so, you know, we start to get a sense of how interrelated these principles are and how they build on each other. So, I mean, even to explore it from a very simple standpoint that I like to do is, if we're working with living systems, if we're working with nature, then we need to know what the whole is that we're working with. We need to know what the essence is, and this is actually reversed here, so sorry about that. We need to know what the essence is, and then we start to get a sense of the potential. And one of the ways that I really like to, that I grasp it, is through my relationship with my children, and those of us who have children or have been in contact with children, or even just people in our lives. You really get a sense of their uniqueness, their essence. And once you're really close to someone and you have a sense of what that essence is, you also get a feeling for what the potential is. to be developed. So potential is a different way of approaching. I mean, in a project sense, it's a different way of approaching things, because it's not about identifying problems and coming up with solutions, which is the real mental shift that regenerative practice and regenerative development work is asking of us, is how can we change our minds around how we approach things. And that's one of the key things, is that when we're working with living systems, it's really important to work with their potential. So one example is, like, if my son is struggling with something, you know, struggling with something, like it's his homework or something along those lines, then I can address it from the standpoint of, like, okay, he's got a problem and I need to help him out with the problem. Or I can address it from the standpoint of, like, his essence and the potential, and and what is it that he's asking to become? What is it that he's moving to becoming, and how can I help that development? So when we know that, when we have a sense of the essence, we have a sense of the potential, then we can move into develop.
Oh, it's me again. Okay. Develop. Yeah. So when you're talking about potential, when you're talking about essence, it's like, how are you going to get from your essence to potential? And, you know, we don't come out as fully formed human beings from the womb, fully intelligent with no issues and no problems. That's not the case. So everything hinges in a way on our development. And when I'm speaking about development here, I'm not just speaking about growth or doing courses. I'm speaking about the development of you as a whole human being. And I think this is where the term practice comes from, regenerative practice. Because in order to develop, it's almost like it's something you need to commit to on a daily basis if you're really going to transform and develop your mind into a mind that can think regeneratively. And so development is actually if you can show the diagram, Sadra, where it sits in the middle between the triad of potential, whole, and essence, and the triad of field, nested, and nodes or nodal. So development is necessary for you to be able to work with what we call the outer principles. So the inner principles are potential, whole, and essence, and the outer principles are field, nestedness, and nodal. So you need to be able to work and learn as you go, because I think how I've been seeing my own sort of development over time, particularly after doing the TRP, is that a lot of the time I've been working what you could call in the unknown, and I've also been putting up goals or purposes that are actually promises beyond ableness. So they create a real stretch. So there's no chance I can sit back on my laurels. I actually have to develop myself. I have to learn how to think so that I can be effective, so that I can fully engage with the nature of something that is living. So that's develop. Anything to add, Amanda?
I feel like we're developing as we go through this webinar. So just a shout out to the team. You know, great work so far, and yeah, absolutely. Once you work through.
We're also developing a bit of a shortage of time, so we need to whip through these last few.
Yeah, look, I'll just touch lightly on nested because we have already sort of touched on it already, but so the regenerative thinking really needs to be nested. So because in a living system, things are inherently nested, right? So when you're imagining the whole, we actually need to think about it within a smaller or larger system. And so an example of that, just going back to the project I was talking about before, the Massey University Innovation Complex. I mean, they, when we started asking ourselves, you know, what is the influence on this project and what are we actually embedded in? What is the larger system here? That we found that not only was our project greater than just the building, it's actually greater than the university. It's actually our nested system is within the wider Auckland region, expanding to New Zealand itself. And that part of that living system is actually, we need to now reflect New Zealand's cultural history and political environment through our project. So, which is a really cool realization at the time. So that's just a real quick one on nested.
Cool.
Move on to
yeah. I could do a quick one on nodes as well, because I'd really like to give space and time to Brett and Andrea to speak to their project. So nodes or another way of looking at it is nodal intervention. This is a way of working that is not working in terms of priority. It's not working in terms of scalability. It's not working in terms of leverage. It's in terms of working in nodes. And if you work nodally, you actually cover those three that I just mentioned. So nodally is like when you come to really understand the context in which your project is nested, what you'll start to see is opportunities that with very little effort, you can have a massive effect. Yeah. So you're looking for nodes within the system where things will actually grow, develop, regenerate. And that comes as you start to deepen your understanding of the context, as you start to deepen your understanding of the living system in which you're nested. Over to you, Sadra. Fields.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'll do the seventh principle as well. So just to quickly touch on these is that these are the first principles of regeneration. I like to think of them sometimes. I mean, they're very synonymous to principles of living systems. So we hear a lot about systems thinking, and I think regeneration is really about living systems thinking. So we're working with we're living the places that we're living in are also living places. So there isn't any reason why we would treat our own development in a different way that we would treat a forest to a city, or it's all the places that are on that we're part of are living places. So these are also principles of living systems. So living systems are whole. They have an essence. There is a potential. They have an evolutionary trajectory. So the potential is being developed. They are nested. So they are nested within other living systems. So Auckland is nested within the North Island. The North Island is nested within Aotearoa. So these are they're all nested, and nature also operates nodally. So there's always opportunities. The opportunities that have the biggest ripple effect, the biggest impact in that system, are opportunities that are there for the taking, and that are we're naturally prone to move towards if we're working regeneratively. So that all of those connect in to the seventh principle, which is systemic reciprocity rather than transactional exchange. And one of the a quote that comes to mind when I think of this one is a quote from Affairs, which is the sun never says to the moon that you owe me. And when you're working regeneratively in a system, everyone is playing their role. Everything is contributing what it needs to contribute and receiving what it needs to receive and the nourishment that it needs to receive. So there's no extraction in that. There's no one taking value for itself. It's all in a reciprocal exchange rather than I need this from you in order to give this to you. It doesn't feel like that when there's a regenerative living system set up. So that's the 7th principle.
Thanks, Sadra. If you could put us all back on the screen, I'll bring Andrea and Brett in. So welcome, Andrea and Brett. Thanks for your patience. It's been quite a long sit. I hope your sitting bones aren't too sore. But what I'd like to do is just in the next 8 minutes or so is for you to say what project you're working on, where you're from, and what role you're doing within the project. So would you like to kick that off, Brett?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks very much, team. You're fantastic. Great developmental thinking going on. It's good. My name's Brett Nearny. I live in Port Chalmers in Dunedin, and I work for the Dunedin City Council as a project manager. And the project that we're talking about specifically in terms of regenerative work is the South Dunedin Library and Community Complex project, which is a long-standing project for the council, and it is not one that has not been without its challenges. And given this nature of South Dunedin, a very low-lying area in the country that's suffered from flooding and has quite a lot of issues with, particularly with water, there's a whole lot of factors around that South Dunedin project that make it a big challenge to take on. So my role in the project is as a project manager. I'm actually what's called the senior supplier in the project control group, and I'm really there to help to facilitate the design process and responsible for the quality of the kind of outputs and the technical integrity of the project.
Thanks, Brett. Awesome. Andrea.
Yay, finally. How am I joking? I'm the engagement coordinator for property services in the Dunedin City Council. So I'll work within Brett's team, and I am sort of maybe the little glue that keeps our co-design panel together, making sure everyone knows what they're doing when they're doing it. But I do actually engage in other projects that our programs team do as well. So South Dunedin project is not our only.
So thanks, Andrea. So when we were going through that list of principles there, was there one principle in particular that was your favourite, and why?
Mine? Are you talking to me? More?
Yeah.
I really, well, as engagement coordinator, I really love the essence thing about the uniqueness, because it seems to be the thing that everyone kind of thinks all size fits all, one size fits all, and it doesn't, and that's what I love about this regenerative practice, is that it really digs deep and it looks at what the essence is of each project, and I love that. That's what really makes my hair fling back or whatever.
Thanks, Andrea. And Brett, do you have a favourite principle?
I think working, from problems to potential. So, I mean, as a project manager, you're always dealing with problems, and we always pride ourselves on being great problem solvers. But doing regenerative work, the problem solving doesn't go away. It's still there. You still have to work with problems, but you're also asked to work on another level, which is, what's the potential of the place and all that's involved with it. So it's a tremendous challenge, and just to kind of get yourself into that space continually. So yeah, I'm all into that big time.
Do you have Brett? Do you have one you've been particularly challenged by in terms of the principles you're not quite understanding, or you haven't got your teeth into yet?
Well, that's the same one, actually. I do like challenges. I've always been a bit like that, but yeah, I mean, working with potential is something else. It's like, and especially when, like, I started to ramble on a bit there in my intro, I lost the plot a bit, but because this project is quite challenging. I mean, it's a challenging environment, but we've actually managed to get a bunch of people who represent the community together and into a kind of panel, and the joy that's come out of them, the hope, you know, the real sort of connection with, you know, their place that they've expressed and that we've started to understand together is really kind of takes you above all the problems, you know. So the problems are still there, and we've got all sorts of engineering challenges and things. They don't go away. We still have to work them out. But when you're doing it with a whole potential kind of mindset, it's a different way of approaching it. And yeah, so there's a tremendous amount of good stuff going on there.
Great. Let's continue with the flavour that you've brought up. So Andrea, what effect have you seen on yourself or your team or on DCC or South Dunedin itself as you've gone through the regenerative process?
I think I've become more multi-dimensional, if you can become that. It's amazing just how it actually makes you look at so many different angles and actually take everything on board. I kind of think Brett was talking about our community panel. That's been an amazing journey. We've all sort of like come from kindergarten. Maybe we might have just passed out of kindergarten now. I'm not really quite sure. But it has been incredible that just the whole aha moments that everyone has had. I kind of think that we probably pulled the wool over their eyes. I think they were coming with their pens and paper to design a library. But actually, we've taken them on quite an amazing journey, and it's still not over yet. But the value for that community is just amazing.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. And any last words from either of you that you'd like to share in regards to working regeneratively or regenerative practice?
Well, I think just the challenge, I guess, is continually, you know, for myself, is just kind of maintaining the focus, you know, continually refocusing. And, you know, I have my own work going on, my own inner work, if you like, which is, you were talking about the frameworks and, you know, changing your thinking and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of going on continually. And actually keeping that alive and in this place is, I was at a meeting today with a bunch of people, council people, and you know what, there was a whole bunch of energy that was generated around you know, thinking of people talking about connecting, people talking about relationships, about building capacity, and you know, and how they wanted to be guardians of Dunedin. And this wasn't a regenerative conversation. So the stuff they were expressing was actually kind of regenerative principles. That, you know, so I think people really want this stuff, and you know, they know they need it, you know, they feel it. And so, yeah, so I'm excited about that and wanting to kind of develop that in myself and with the people I work with.
Oh, great. And anything, Andrea?
Yeah, I kind of probably echo, I was at the same meeting as Brett. I kind of just think that it's kind of time. It really needs to, I think nature and how we work with nature really has to start being put forward a little bit more, because otherwise, you know, we're not going to, it's not going to look pretty. And I would like to kind of think, as Sasha, you were talking, Asante, you were talking about your child, you know, I want to leave a much better legacy for my children and their grandchildren. So I think we know enough. We know enough now.
Well, kia ora to you both. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to participate with us. So I'll hand it back to you, Sadra.
Okay. Do we want to see if there are any questions to take? We're at 5:30.
Sadra, there's been no new questions, so that's okay. I think we can close. And Andrea, I just want to say I do love a good aha moment. You do get a few of them, and it is fantastic when you do. So really appreciate you guys sharing your story today, actually.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Brett, for jumping on with us today. It's good to hear about your project.
Thanks very much.
I heard the designs came through today, so
yeah,
must be exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've got a session tomorrow with the community group, and it's going to be exciting seeing that vision plan unrolling.
All right. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And I think one of the things one of the reasons why we're so passionate about this work is because we see the potential that it has in Aotearoa, and the effect it's had on us as practitioners. It's hard work to take a step out of our habits and the habits of thought that we have, but it's necessary, as Andrea and Brett, both of you mentioned. Like, it's just really time for us to be able to think about our world and our places in a way that is aligned with nature. So we'll close with karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ke ana te atākura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Jonathan, and
Thank you.
the team at Vision Week for having us on.
No problem at all. That was great. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Cheers all.
Ka kite.